How do you know to what extent you can handle a person's emotion? The answer was to the extent that it is not painful to you.
Here is a man who wears multiple hats as a mentor, motivational speaker, life coach, scientist, healer, philosopher, and also a business coach.
What made you to resign your job? What is that calling that you have got inside?
For me, it was purely selfish reason that I want to grow spiritually.
You want to grow spiritually.
He has created innovative methods for individuals, couples, and families to achieve their emotional wellness. He has developed powerful coaching and healing techniques which are unique.
So we have to build our strength to grow enough to let go of the fear. Rest of our life we have to engage in action. And during action all these triggers come in between.
Is there a way for a common man to get connected to that ocean of peace and ocean of love all the time?
Stay tuned to PMC English to watch the journey of Mr. Ved Vyas from being a nuclear scientist in Baba Atomic Research Center to a spiritual scientist. From being a spiritual scientist, then evolving into a professional life coach and a karmic healer. He is also the founder of Zeston Life Organization. Let's now welcome Mr. Ved Vyas, who is enriched with the depth of spirituality and knowledge.
Spirituality is full of paradoxes, where opposites are true.
Welcome to PMC English. I am your Pradeep Anirudh. My dear friends, he is a man of science and spirituality. He has worked for Baba Atomic Research Center as a nuclear scientist. He has volunteered for 4 years as a faculty and motivational speaker at Brahma Kumaris. He has travelled across India and had taken more than 1,000 sessions to engineers and scientists. He is also a certified business and leadership coach. He is a director consultant for a chapter of BNI in Hyderabad. He has many other things to his credit. So he is none other than Ved Vyas ji, who is in our studio today, and we will know his thoughts today. Namaste sir, welcome to PMC studio.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, my first question is, you are working as a nuclear scientist for BARC.
Yes.
And then you resigned your job.
Yes.
What made you to resign your job? What is that calling that you have got inside?
I worked at BRC and teaching meditation to scientific community there and their families. For about 9 years, I taught meditation. But there came a time when I felt that I want to do much more than this. That felt like I'm doing very little, the potential I have. And my own growth was, whatever growth initially happened in first 5 years there was exponential. Then after a while, the same experiences and everything repeat. And there'll be some challenges where we get stuck. And to overcome that, we need a change in life. And we'll see that there is a lot of potential I'm not utilizing. And that motivated me that I need to change now. And I couldn't stay there anymore. I had to go out in the world and explore.
So are you happy now? Coming out of BARC is a very big decision.
Yes.
It's a secure government job. You're getting your regular salary, very good respect.
Right.
And then you also had an opportunity to teach the meditation that you have believed in.
Right.
That too for 9 years. And then now you have become a full-timer.
Yes.
So did you like this different lifestyle which you have got?
In fact, I liked in BRC when I was there, I was doing something very useful, and I also teaching meditation was very satisfactory. The moment I moved on to Brahma Kumaris, a full-time faculty there and organizing programs, that was another level of spiritual growth. And I loved that too. And after that, I came back to Hyderabad, became a life coach, and started a new direction to expand again. So each phase in my life has taught me many things, and it has led to the next phase. And I don't feel that I was unhappy, that's why I came out, because it was a preparation for the next stage of my life. I had to move on to the next stage.
Wonderful, sir. Spending 4 years in Mount Abu, Brahma Kumaris, how was it?
It was amazing. It was like always living in a spiritual high. People take drinks or drugs to get a high. Being at Brahma Kumaris Mount Abu was constant high for me. Just being there, that environment, that peace, the kind of meditation people do there, it's amazing. Even people who come there for 2 or 3 days experience that kind of experiences. Their deep experiences happen there.
One thing, when I see you, your eyes reflect a certain joy.
Right.
And the same thing I have observed with a lot of other Brahma Kumaris practitioners also.
Right.
What is that inner thought that you have which emanates this kind of peace and joy, which is even seen by others?
See, this joy, it doesn't come from thinking. It is from the being. In Brahma Kumaris, meditation is about communication of the soul with the Supreme Soul. Supreme Soul is defined as ocean of love, ocean of peace. So if I am connecting with the Supreme Soul, I am not experiencing these things, then I am not doing meditation. Right? So that is the fundamental experience on which meditation is built. That is the reason I joined Brahma Kumaris first time, because in those programs I could experience that peace and I could experience that love. So these things are the basis from which my spirituality actually happened, or we say grew into. That was the budding stage, and based on which the rest of the thing, the personality and the process and learnings all happened. Without this experience, I don't think there is anything else there. Everything else is a shell.
You said two things, ocean of peace and ocean of love.
Yes.
Is there a way for a common man to get connected to that ocean of peace and ocean of love all the time?
Yes, just believe. The challenge with today's common man is we are too busy in life, as family, as financial issues, as social issues, rather than focusing on life as it is being expressed within. We have no time for ourselves. In fact, if I have to see from the larger perspective, each person is like in an ant's colony, and each person is very lonely. Only because we forgot that God is with us. We just have to remember. And when we remember, we get connected. In Brahma Kumaris, that's all is meditation, remembrance. Remembering that God is peace and He is with me. Being with that connection, that relationship of father and child, being with the peace and love, is meditation. There is nothing else to it. And because there is nothing else, that is the only thing there, that is the only experience I have. So it's natural that come up.
You said one master statement, that God is peace and He is with us.
With us.
All the time. So remembering this
Yes.
will give you a way of being which is joyful. And this knowledge, do you remember this all the time? Or it has become a natural way of being? Does it require any effort to remember this truth?
It does require.
Okay.
That is why we practice meditation. Why does it require is because we all have our own karmic baggage, which triggers us, which creates sadness, which creates many other emotions, anger, irritation, and so many other things. So meditation is a time when we exclusively give for ourselves and God. At that time, at least these things won't come in between. The rest of the life, we have to engage in action. And during action, all these triggers come in between, and we have to experience that. Recently, I was talking to one of my mentors who taught me life coaching. And one of the key point we came to the realization in the conversation was, how do you know to what extent you can handle a person's emotion? The answer was, to the extent that it is not painful to you. The moment other person's emotions become painful to you, you can't tolerate anymore. So you disconnect, right? So that pain is where we know our limitation. That pain is where we know where we need to grow. So she asked me, Vedvyas, I taught you life coaching, but you are doing a much deeper work than I am able to. How are you able to? So I told her that, see, you taught me this, but you have been avoiding that pain by sending people away whenever they have too much pain for you to handle. But I am living constantly on the edge of pain because I have accepted that pain. As much as I have accepted joy and peace, I have also accepted pain. And because I've accepted joy and peace, I have capacity to accept pain. Just because joy is there, pain doesn't exist, that doesn't happen. And because joy is there, because I have capacity to accept that pain, I'm growing spiritually, I'm able to help people at a much deeper level. Because I understand that pain. If you are avoiding pain, you can't understand client's pain. So it's a huge contrast in spirituality. One thing I learned at the earliest, one of the fundamentals is spirituality is full of paradoxes, where opposites are true. You people usually feel that if a person is joyful, there will be no pain. But the fact is that if a person is joyful, then he has capacity to accept that pain that he needs to clear in this life. So he has as much pain as well, but he can tolerate it. That is the real purpose of life, to clear the karmic accounts. If we are avoiding pain, we are not clearing karmic accounts. We are not growing, we are stuck.
Cool, sir. Beautifully said. What is karma? Why does one has to face this karma? Is it just for his evolution and learning?
Karma is action and reaction, is very simple way they put it. But it's more than that. Though it is that, it is much more deeper concept than that. Shall we do an experiment?
Yeah,
with
sure.
karma? Do you like dogs?
I like dogs.
You like dogs. How much? On a scale of 1 to 10, give me a
On a
number.
scale of 1 to 10, I like them at 9.
9? You really like dogs.
Yeah.
Very good. So we'll see what happens in this experiment. It's an exploration.
Okay.
So there is a man who goes for evening walks.
Right.
Okay. One day he was going to the market and there was a stray dog around. He was not a great dog lover, just he was tolerating dogs. So he saw the dog but didn't see also. Like it happens, right? We see many things but we don't observe them. After a while, dog ran away. He knew that it ran away, but it didn't matter to him.
Got that.
And he was walking. After 2 minutes, he heard loud screams, painful screams. When he looked at what happened, there was an old man who was walking with the help of a stick, and this dog bit him. So he was screaming with a lot of pain. And this man wanted to help that person.
Got that.
And before he could take few steps, someone near that person, that man, scared the dog away and took him to the hospital. He couldn't do anything. He was just an observer. He just saw that a dog has bitten the old man and the old man was screaming with pain. Sometimes things happen like this. Nobody has any control. Right? He just observed. He went home. So every day he used to go for a walk just like that. After a month or so, he was walking in a different, little bit residential area where there was not much traffic. He wanted to be peaceful. Sometimes we feel that someone is coming from behind, right? Someone is observing or something. We just look back. So he turned back and saw that there was a dog following him. What did he see?
A dog following him.
What would his reaction be?
He would usually be scared because of his earlier experience.
Right. What is his earlier experience?
His earlier experience was a stray dog biting him.
So how much weightage should one experience have?
An earlier experience does have weightage.
Does have weightage, right?
Weightage in the present moment.
What if he was a dog lover like you?
That thinking would change a little bit, yeah. Can change a little bit.
But still he would be scared.
He would be now more cautious.
More cautious, right?
Cautious. And maybe a little scared also.
Maybe a little scared, right? How do you know about him? Are you speaking about him or you?
It is trying to just imagine myself in that situation. Yeah, that's all.
And your reaction is what you're saying.
Right.
And you're a dog lover. And suddenly you're scared of dogs with one experience. So this is karma. Karma is not about an action that you have to perform. Any pain that we observe, we are absorbing. If we don't understand the context and the purpose of the pain, the reason we absorb it is because we have rejected pain. The man thought that old man getting bitten is wrong. Who are we to judge what is right or what is wrong? Yes, it is painful and we need to be compassionate. But the sense of right and wrong that comes in here, that is the action he performed. He judged that dog was wrong and old man was bitten. Something wrong happened in the world. Don't we do this all the time?
Yes.
So that created negative karma for him, because that turned into his fear. And then that got reflected here. So if a simple thought experience can create karma, imagine all our thinking and whatever we are doing, how much karma will it accumulate? How many fears are we accumulating? These fears are of karma, nothing else. When fears are suppressed again and again and again, they become very painful. That is the pain we are experiencing. So when I am saying I am living on that edge of the pain, I am constantly experiencing that fears and releasing that energy. Does it make sense?
It makes sense. So what is the role of fears, or what is the role of love in emotional states that a human being experiences?
So like just now I told you. Let's take it a little further.
Okay.
Now, was the dog that was following the man peaceful dog or a biting dog?
It can be any kind of dog.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because you are threatened, you feel that it could be anything. Now you are not certain, right? But actually, if you look at the situation, that dog, was it attacking him? Right?
Situation.
So a peaceful dog or a violent dog, what is it now?
It is just a possibility of both.
Who decides what possibility will come out?
The person who is in that situation.
Yes, if he is threatened, dog is threatened. If he is peaceful, dog is peaceful.
So you mean to say his thinking is creating the reality of whether the dog is going to be biting him or not?
Obviously. If the person picks up a stone and he is expressing fear, will dog not feel that fear?
Right.
They are more sensitive to that than humans are. And immediately it will attack. So his fear he manifested.
Okay.
If actual dog was actually peaceful there, if this background was not there, if he saw a dog and he was just dog loving person like you, would he feel threatened?
No.
No. So that bad karma led to this. And this bad karma today is creating bigger bad karma, more fears. So sometimes fears are actually real, in the sense that what is real, what is not real is again a big question. But the simple point is that most of our fears, 99% of our fears are like this, which are developed by karma. But there sometimes situations require protect ourselves from others, and there being cautious is important. Sometimes fears help automate that process. So that is what we call is shielding. These fears shield us from getting hurt.
So it is also a kind of protection mechanism that we develop.
Yeah, but it is also protecting us from growing, preventing us.
It is securing us, at the same time it is also
Preventing
us to grow.
So we have to build our strength to grow enough to let go of the fears. That is spiritual growth.
Have you surpassed all your fears?
No. That's why I said I'm living on the edge of that fear all the time.
Okay. What is your biggest fear?
I believe that everybody's biggest fear is loneliness.
Than death?
That is again the ultimate, what we say, expression of loneliness, because it is uncertain. What happens after death? Will I have people around me? I'm going alone. Everybody else is staying here.
Got that. This is a very interesting way of looking at death.
Right? I'm the only person leaving. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. Will I exist, not exist? Will I be lonely, not lonely? I even don't know that. So that fear of death is also somewhere related to fear of loneliness. If a person knows that God is there with me all the time, then even in death God is there with me. So there is nothing to fear. But to create that state of graceful death, conscious graceful death, that is called epitome of success of human life, where a person can consciously leave the body without being afraid. It takes a lot of sadhana, a lot of fears need to be cleared, because the need to survive is integrated into the body. Need to survive is integrated into all our fears, and loneliness is part of that survival. We don't want to be lonely, we want to be surrounded, but we are scared to be interacting with each other on a deeper level, because we don't trust each other, we don't trust ourselves. So there are so many issues that come up with this, or it's very deep. But in essence, we are suffering from loneliness. Including me, I've seen everybody suffering from loneliness at the deepest level. Very few don't suffer that.
Sir, you said God is peace and He is with me.
Yes,
So, in this way, you may be coming out of your loneliness
yes.
in your social life, in your personal life,
Mm.
or even at the time of death. If God is with me,
Mm.
yes, that will help you to not feel lonely and accept death.
Yes.
In Upanishads,
Mm.
they say, Aham Brahmasmi Tatvamasi.
Mm.
I am the God, I am the Brahman. So, most of these Vedantic teachings say that you yourself is God and you are one without a second.
So my question is, do you want to be God?
It is not whether I am wanting and willing and wishing to be God or not. It is a spiritual truth that is realized by the great saints and seers.
So very simple.
So how do you take this contrasting philosophy? Because you are also a master's in philosophy. So,
In spirituality, paradoxes are true.
okay.
Exactly opposite concepts, both are true. On one side, Dvaita, on the other side, Advaita. It is a different path to getting you there. It is not, this is absolute truth, so that cannot be, or that is absolute truth, this cannot be. Like another very classic example that we discuss is free will versus destiny. Which is true? If you have free will, can destiny be true? If destiny is true, can free will be true?
Yeah, that is a classic question every seeker has. Yeah.
Both are true.
In which way?
To the extent we are capable of exercising our free will, destiny is fixed in that direction. Destiny is a possibility. There is a destiny which has 90% possibility, there is a destiny which is 50% possibility. But if we shift our willpower enough, then that 50% possibility will become 90% possibility. But usually that doesn't happen so easily. So 90% possibility is fixed destiny.
So, do you believe that we are creating our own reality? And how much of our reality are we creating? Is it 90%, 100% of our reality? What mechanism are we creating this reality? Is it by emotions, feelings, thoughts,
All of them.
imaginations,
All of them.
aims, ambitions, intentions?
All of them.
All of them.
At the core, the loneliness
Okay.
creates our reality. All our fears create our reality. Because if you look at what is your reality in a situation, in the dog situation, if there was no fear, there is a different reality. Dog could be friendly. Whereas, if you are afraid, then dog is threatened. And you are creating a different reality. So your reality inside is manifesting on the outside. So what reality we hold depends upon our experiences, our opinions. It has nothing to do with the reality on the outside. It doesn't mean that reality doesn't exist. It just means that we are not looking at it. We are too, overwhelmed by our own fears, which create a different reality than what is.
You mean to say our fears are also creating our reality?
Yes.
Okay. Our fear of loneliness especially.
Yes. So, what irritates you most?
Nothing irritates me so much. Deception, deceit.
Yeah, deceit. Right?
Yeah.
So, what is your fear? Fear of being deceived.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
So, you are always on lookout. Who is going to deceive me? Right? If there is a slight possibility that someone is acting suspicious, even if they are not, then suddenly this fear pops up and creates a different reality. So whose reality is that?
That is my reality.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not the only fear that we have. There are a number of fears. And we don't know most of the fears because we have been avoiding them so long that we don't know that we are having that fear. We have adapted so well to our fears that we are just skating around them so that we can remain in our sanity. It's not easy to face the real reality of ourselves, to actually experience and be with that pain. It requires a lot of sadhana.
You're also experienced Vipassana
Yes,
and other meditation techniques.
yes.
So, what is the significance of breath in meditation? Or what is the significance of breath in understanding spirituality?
Breath is connection of mind, body and prana. It's called prana, the life force. Breath is the way we can consciously regulate that force flowing through our body. And body is through which we are experiencing these fears and karma. They are stored in the body. If you see, Vipassana is a process of sublimating that experiences and releasing those energies so that they won't trigger us. Just by observing breath impartially, or what is it, Sakshi Drishta, being equanimous. When we are equanimous, not getting involved in our fears, they get released. So, breath is a process that facilitates this, because if there is a fear, we are equanimous, but our breath is not there, then the release is not happening. We are not aware of that fear. So, our energy is not going there. It goes when it becomes really painful. If something is painful, then we are constantly aware of it. So, our breath is there, whether we like it or not. To what extent are we able to breathe is another question. It can be suffocating, or it can be easy to breathe. If it is easier to breathe, then it's easy to heal. If the pain is suffocating, then the person struggles a lot. If the pain is hidden, then breath is not healing that hidden fear. That's why consciousness is very important there. Bringing the pain into consciousness, experiencing and clearing it. So breath is a process, especially when we are working with the body, it's very important. Whereas if you are looking at Brahma Kumari's kind of meditation, which is creating constant high, it is receiving energy, there we don't need breath also. We can be completely silent and completely forget breath, and still it will be happening, because it's a connection between soul and Supreme Soul. It has nothing to do with the body. Right? There's a purification as a different process already.
When you call someone or something as a Supreme Soul, does it mean that we are inferior to that Supreme Soul? Does that give solace that some Supreme Being is ready and able to take care of us?
So is the child inferior to a father?
No.
You have the answer. Supreme is the father. I am the child. So am I inferior? No. So that there are some process, some beliefs that create the distance between God is so great, I am so low.
Right.
That then we are breaking that relationship actually. We are creating distance. Whereas to have a loving relationship, we need closeness. So this relationship of father and child is very close. So their inferior or superior doesn't come into picture.
So it is a loving relationship.
It's a loving relationship.
It's like a father and a child relationship.
Or if you like Radha and Krishna. Bhakti has many forms. You can choose as a friend or a lover or a father, whatever you want. But have that close relationship. Don't create the distance.
With the divine.
Yes.
Sir, you have stayed in Mount Abu for 4 years.
Yes.
And you said that it was a wonderful experience.
Yes.
What are your top 3 learnings out of you spending 4 years of your life in Brahma Kumaris, especially at Mount Abu?
Mount Abu. One thing I learned is that the experiences that we can have when these programs are conducted in group, the masses create an energy. And it's like a force. So if we want to grow and experience and recharge ourselves, that's an amazing place to be. Many healings naturally happen at that place. People don't even know they are getting healed. So that kind of, it's like a pilgrimage. So it is a powerhouse. How powerhouses are created for spiritual growth. Like temples have been created. This was one such place for me. So it's intense practices are very easily possible there. In other places we have to struggle a lot to create those experiences. So that is what I learned there. And second thing, I've met many great personalities. Dadi Janki, all the great personalities. Did programs with them, and we see the amount of wisdom that whatever our experience is nothing before what they have achieved, and it creates great humility. That there is so much more to do. Otherwise, that high is so high that we are the highest. Only when we see them that they are much more higher, okay, there is a lot more to go.
Then there is some humility that comes
Humility
into
comes
our
into
heart.
picture.
Okay.
There's a great humility that we had to learn, which naturally happens because of that environment and those people with we do. And second thing is the connectedness that we feel to the world. So in that environment there was much better connectedness because everybody was working in the same direction. Whereas the moment I come out of that environment, the connectedness was not as much. It was like, why are we even struggling with all these things in the world? But that was also advantage and learning, and also a disadvantage because I'm getting distant from the society. So that was one of the reasons I became a life coach. I had to learn that connection. I have to grow all around. And another thing is we can create amazing experiences, but experiences are not transformations. To work on transformation, we have to work on fears, identifying fears, clearing that energy. It's an intense, long-term work. And just being in high doesn't give you that. So I also learned that for really to work on purifying myself and really work on understanding who I am, this high is not actually aiding unless I am increasing my capacity for pain. If I am using it to avoid pain, it's actually creating the distance. So when I learned that I need to be connected to that pain, then I said this high is good, I can get it whenever I want. I want to be connected to myself too. My own pains, my own karma that I need to work out with. So that was another beautiful learning I got there.
Wonderful, sir. I remember an enlightened person saying that it's not great that you go to Himalayas and be in meditation and be happy. You be in the society, be in the marketplace, be in the relations, and then you be peaceful, then I salute you.
Yes.
So that's how you came back to the normal life with the normal people.
That's a little bit theoretical for me in the sense that that's a very good suggestion.
Okay.
But for me it was purely selfish reason that I want to grow
You
spiritually.
want to grow spiritually.
And for this was required at that point of stage of my life.
And then now you're also working as a business and leadership coach. And you have developed your own coaching modalities. You have developed your own healing methodologies.
Yes.
By what all you have learned and experienced.
Right.
So how is it working for you? How are you able to make a difference in the people who come to you?
In the society today, in India basically, people don't know what life coaching is. It's a Western concept. Here people know guru, here people know priest, here people know astrologer, here people know palmist, many other things, but people don't know what life coach is. Now the awareness is getting created. But when I started as a life coach, people did not know. So who came to me were people who were suffering. Because my own learning at that stage of life was to know what is suffering. And when they came for suffering, I created processes to help that suffering to build a person despite suffering. So for that, I integrated one of the beautiful concepts called radical forgiveness. It is an amazing concept of understanding and forgiving ourselves and others. That process into life coaching and my own experience of healing processes to understand why the person is suffering, because there is a lot of emotional energy person is holding on, which is connected to certain memories in their life or past life. And these, until this energy is there in the emotion, like pain is there, they can't overcome anything else. That's the highest thing in their life. It is too painful to do anything else. So I created a healing process where this pain can be healed. Not because I am giving the healing energy like in Reiki or other process. I am not giving any healing energy. I'm facilitating process. That was the beauty of integrating this life coaching and healing process. I'm just facilitating so that a person's mind is capable of healing themselves. I respect that capability. I help that capability to happen right in front of me. So I take them into guided meditation, create an amazing healing environment in their mind, this reality of healing, and strengthen it to the extent that this pain can be introduced and they have capacity to address it. Once that is addressed and cleared off, then there is a shift in their perspective. So much shift that a person who has always been angry about something suddenly forgot to be angry and never remembered that I was angry.
That is interesting.
That kind of shift is possible. So that is how I created this healing process, to clear off those karmic fears and pains associated with certain belief systems, so that they can have enough space in their mind to see what is reality and change, so that they can work with reality in much better ways. So be it leadership. Leadership is nothing but a relationship between a leader and people around him. So if leader is having a lot of pains inside, he doesn't have the mind space to understand people around him. So when this space is created, suddenly he is able to understand why this person is behaving this way. I don't have to tell him this is the leadership process, this is what you have to follow. No, I only create that space in his mind so that he can be compassionate with others. And when he is compassionate, then leadership is there. Because people will follow compassion. Because everybody is lonely. All they need is attention. Right kind of attention, with right kind of respect. Right? So that is leadership. When you come to speak about business development, I don't work with a process that you have to do this. No. Again, for a business person, business is extension of their own personality. Whatever their personality is gets expressed as business. So if their personality is painful, business is painful. So when I relieve with this pain, then they are able to grow the business. It's an application of the process. So where regular business coaching ends, when the pain becomes too much and people are not able to follow the processes that business gurus give, that is where my work starts. Then people come to me. And then I create that space enough so that they can follow those things. I don't have to teach strategy. I only have to create that space in their mind, relieve that pain so that they can actually apply the business principles. In fact, they don't even need business principles, because all business strategies are common sense to someone who has that space. If I create that space, it's common sense for this person too.
That's a beautiful way of telling what business is.
Yeah.
That it is an extension of that person's personality.
Yeah.
And when you work with the person's personality and create space, then his common sense will drive the business.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful way of looking at business. How do you work with the personalities of people? Are there different kinds of personalities?
Yeah, there are different kinds of personality that I use 2-3 models. Primarily, I've been using DISC model to help people understand. It's rather than me working with their personalities, it's for them to understand the people around them and what to expect, what not to expect. So DISC, Enneagram, these are different personality models. Easiest is 4 personality model, that is DISC. And little more complicated, those who want more of spiritual bent of mind, for them we can use Enneagram. But whatever application is morely for people to understand how people around them are behaving and why they are behaving that way, and how to be compassionate about them and how to react in the right way. Like if someone is very demanding, there's a dominant personality. So dominant personality is usually respect based. So if you don't show your self-respect, they will ignore you. So when we create this awareness, see, this person is dominant personality, he will need you to show your self-respect, otherwise he will ignore you. Then because there is a need for self-respect to be shown there, and they already have that self-respect that they have built now, they are able to express it there. When they express it there, that relationship improves, and suddenly the other person starts respecting him instead of treating as a doormat. So the relationship improves. So different personalities need different ways of handling. So in this process, what we do is we educate people, clients, that you have to deal with different people in different ways. There are different conditionings of the people, different fears. So once fears are addressed and understood, compassion happens, and they are able to maintain that relationship in a constructive way.
So what is ISC?
D is dominant, I is influential personality, S is supportive, C is compliant. So dominant personality usually assert themselves. They are over assertive. They need to see the respect in other person, only then they respect. Certainly influential person is party animal. This person loves to be center of attention. They like lot of appreciation. They don't like criticism, but they will do anything if you appreciate them. Ask them for lunch or dinner, they'll come. So these people are very good salespeople. So if you want to increase your business, get a lot of referrals or all this, these are the people you need to maintain good relationship with. Then there's supportive personalities. These are very good managers because they nurture relationships. So if you give the most challenging situation, you put this supportive person as the in charge of that business or that group, he will have good relationships enough to get people through that difficult phase. Other people won't be able to do that because he has that connect, because they work exclusively on supporting people and building relationships. Then C is the compliant.
They just do what is said.
C is people who believe in processes. Everything has to be rule based. If you have watched Big Bang Theory, there's Sheldon. He doesn't believe in gifting. Penny asks Sheldon, but it's your birthday, I have to gift you. Then his friend says, it is a social convention that cannot be avoided. Oh, in that case I'll do it, because now it has become a rule. The Sheldon is a compliant person. So for him everything has to be explained as a rule. You can't convince him otherwise. Okay, so for compliant people, communication has to be in the form of boundaries, rules, because that's what they love, that structure. So each personality behaves differently. So when we understand that this person is a combination of dominant and compliant, some part has to be respect oriented, some part has to be rule oriented. So that's how we help people understand their environment and navigate that relationships.
Sir, you spoke about radical forgiveness.
Yes.
Why people don't forgive other people, and if they forgive, why do they forgive, and how radical forgiveness process, what you have designed, would help people to forgive?
Actually, I did not design it.
Okay, so how?
It's already designed by a person, Colin, forgot full name. I call him Colin. I met him once, he's no more. And he designed this process called, he proposed this process called radical forgiveness. He believes that we have certain experiences, like for example, the dog experience I just created for you as a thought experiment. If you believe that dogs are biting in nature, what we have done is we have taken it personally, dog is going to bite me in future, right? But if I take you to that process where the first memory I've created for you is a dog is there and it's biting the other person. Why did it bite that person? Do you know? What might have happened? Old man was carrying stick. What might have happened? Somehow that stick threatened the dog. So it reacted violently. Whose mistake? Nobody's mistake. The moment it becomes nobody's mistake, that situation is put in the perspective. Though the pain is there and everything is there, suddenly it becomes impersonal. Right? Then can you forgive the dog?
Yes, it will be easy then.
Right? But if this is not known, if this whole process is ignored, then can you forgive the dog? No. Because it's a threat. Even if you say, I forgive, you are holding that fear. The fear is not gone. So you are really not forgiven. Process of forgiveness, radical forgiveness, is letting go of that fear and shifting that perspective completely. going to the source and doing it.
Beautiful, sir. Beautiful. So it is shifting our perspective that it was a personal experience to a perspective that it was an impersonal experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. And then that lets the person forgive. That's nice. Sir, what is your message to the world and the people as a man of science and spirituality?
Our best message is be compassionate to yourself.
Okay.
When you are being compassionate to yourself and compassionate to our own pain, accept our pain, then automatically we'll be able to be compassionate to others. If we don't have time to be compassionate to our own challenges, and we are too busy doing something outside, then we don't have time to be compassionate towards others. We may act compassionate, we may show compassion, but that's not real compassion. It won't be compassion where it matters. It won't really touch any hearts. So be compassionate to yourself. It's okay to fail. One of the biggest things they hold is loneliness and failure. We are never supposed to fail. It's a huge burden. They're stiff suddenly. I can't fail. Right? So that stiffness that comes is a burden they are carrying. If you say it's okay to fail, it's not the end of the world. Everything becomes easy. It's okay if people reject me. Everything becomes easy. Because it's not rejection permanently, it's just 5 minutes. In that moment people reject and then they forget. Next moment they'll come back. So the temporariness of the emotions and the energy flow, if it is accepted, and if we are okay with it, then life is much easier. We are much more compassionate to ourselves. Instead of carrying that burden of I am not supposed to fail, people, I am not supposed to be insulted, I am not supposed to be done this, I am not supposed, forget about not supposed to. And it's okay if things happen. Forgive yourself, forgive others and move on. That is being compassionate to ourselves.
Beautiful, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your wonderful and deep perspectives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, my dear friends, we have been watching Vedavyasji's perspectives, and let us take his message of being compassionate to ourselves and let's lead a happy, peaceful and loving life. So, we'll meet with one more master another day. Your Pradeep Anirudh signing off. Thank you.